12 years ago when we started the New Yankee Workshop, home computers were rare. But if you don't have one today, for your kids to do their schoolwork on, for you to do your office work on at home, to search the internet for products and information, you're in the dark ages. Now, along with that trend comes the need for some place to put the computer, furniture, place to put the monitor, the keyboard. But not only that, you have to find a place for the printer, the scanner, and all the other peripherals that go along with this equipment. That turns out to be quite a challenge. But I think we've come up with a design that you'll like. A computer desk. That's next, right here on the New Yankee Workshop. Well, we got lucky. We have our own computer expert. Tim Enright is our webmaster, and he runs the New Yankee website. What do we need for the home office today, Tim?
You want to start with speakers.
Okay, so stereo speakers so I can listen to my CDs and take music off the internet.
That's right. And you'll need one of these.
Oh, can they make these any smaller?
They do, but in terms of cost per square inch, this is your best bet. 17-inch high-resolution monitor.
Well, I can see by all the holes that are in the top that this requires ventilation, so I can't really build around it easily.
Nearby, you'll want your keyboard and your mouse.
All right, I would have expected that. That's not a problem.
And don't forget your computer.
I thought the computer was in here.
90% of the computers still look like this. And in front, you'll have a CD, DVD drive, a zip drive, a floppy drive, and it's very common today to have a USB port and a game port. So you want easy access right to the front. And all the cables go into the back of the computer, so you want very easy access to the back as well.
Well, there's a lot of things that plug in there.
And we are lucky.
Why is that?
Because you used to have 4 devices to do copy, fax, scanning, and printing. Now we have 1.
Oh, that's a nice machine. It's going to take up some space, though. So I have to figure out how to get all this equipment into a piece of furniture and not have it too clunky.
That's right.
It's going to be a challenge. Will you come back and help me set it up when I get it done?
Be glad to.
All right, thanks. Well, after my discussions with Tim, I decided that maybe the most appropriate material to set this high-tech equipment against would be old wood. The older, the better. After all, after spending hours navigating the internet and checking out the New Yankee website, you want to feel good about it. You want to appreciate that desk. So I went up to New Hampshire and bought some salvaged wood. This is longleaf southern yellow pine. These were floor joists that were band-sawed in half. Now I know this material looks a little bit rough, but once you run it through the surface planer, this is what you end up with. And once you put some polyurethane on it, look at this, it brings out the beauty of the wood. So what we're going to do is take these bits of pine and build a pedestal desk. 2 pedestals spanned by a nice wood top with breadboard edges. We're going to set the monitor on the top and then take the tower and the printer and hide those in the pedestals. I want to start today building the sides for those pedestals. Here's one that I already made, all glued up. You can see it's rails and stiles and a nice flat panel. I exploded one so you can see the details. There's the 2 stiles which form legs, the top rail, the center stile, and the bottom rail, and 2 panels. Wherever there's a stile that meets another piece or a panel, I need a groove, and I want to make those first. To make the grooves, I've set up my dado. I have the 2 outer blades, which gives me a 1/4 inch in width. I've also set up this featherboard. Sometimes the stock might be bowed a bit. I want to make sure it stays tightly against the fence all the way through the pass. That way the groove will be centered. I've set the height at 1/2 inch. I'll run the piece through, turn it around, run it through again, giving me a perfectly centered groove. Now here I've changed the setup to make the tenons, which are going to go into those grooves. And what I've done is set up my dado now at 5/8 of an inch width, install the sacrificial strip so that part of the blade is under it, set it so I get a 1/2 inch tenon, and I've raised the height so that after 2 passes, the tenon is just the right thickness. Well, now I've turned my attention to the panels. Because the panels are thicker than a 1/4 of an inch, I need to make a little rabbet so that they'll fit into the groove. To do that, the dado is in the same position relative to the fence. I've lowered it down. I've installed a featherboard to push down on the table because if you look at this panel, you can see that it's cupped a little bit. By having the featherboard, it'll stay tight as I pass it through the cutter. Well, now a little bit of assembly. I'm starting to install some glue in the groove area. Now, I don't want to put glue in the entire groove. I only want it where there's a tenon. I want the panel to float so that it won't split. Okay, now this center stile goes right in here. I've put a couple marks to indicate where it is. Put the two rails on and then clamp it up. Okay, now it's time for the panels. Slide those in dry. A little bit of glue just where the tenons are. And slip this in. And you notice I've held the bottom rail up a bit from the bottom of the desk, and that's going to allow me to make 4 feet on each pedestal, which will make it easier to set on the floor. Here are some boards that I've selected for the desk top. And there's bad news and some good news. If you look at these wide pine boards, you can see that in the middle there's a lot of this flat grain. Now that can present some problems. In time, the boards want to curl, which means the whole top could get wavy. Also, this flat grain in the middle sometimes lifts away, so someday you'll be working at your desk, run your hand over it, and you could catch a sliver. Now, if you look at the edge, though, the good news is that this edge, where the grain is very tight and fine, it's almost perfectly up and down. That's like quarter sawn wood, which is very stable. So what I can do is remove as much of the material as possible and then glue it together. Now, I won't worry about little defects like this hole. I have a method for taking care of that we'll show you later. Now let's see how we're doing. The finished top is going to be 34 inches. I have 41. So I can do a little more fine tuning. I want to get rid of some of this sapwood, this light colored wood that's almost white. So I'll take an inch off of this board, an inch off of this board to get rid of some of these nail holes and the sapwood. And even though this one looks pretty good, it's kind of gray and white, and that's not going to come out in the sanding. So I think I'll take an inch off of that and then see where we're at. Well, it's a shame to take away all that wood, but believe me, this is going to be a much more stable top. Now we're down to 38 inches. The next step is to just cut away these edges that were dirty because there might be grit in those before I head to the joiner. All right, I've got 38.5 inches, which leaves me more than enough material to clean up all these edges. They all need to be jointed so that they're nice and straight. Now, I can't tell you how many emails we get with people saying, I'm setting up a workshop, what are the first tools I should buy? They're the ones we've been using this morning. The table saw, a good one, and a good joiner. With the edges jointed, you can see how nicely these pieces come together. There's no space at all. Now, I've spent some time shifting the boards around so that I get similar grain at some of these joints, and the illusion is that when it's all glued up, it's going to look like wide boards again. Now, I've also spent some time laying out some marks for where I want to cut biscuit slots. I'm going to glue and use biscuits to secure all these pieces together. Just put a mark across each joint. And since there are so many boards, I'm also going to number them so that I can keep the sequence the same. Okay, now it's time to glue it up. And because there are so many joints in this top, I'm going to do it in 2 sections because I don't want the glue to set before I can get some clamps on it. So first I roll a little bit on the edge, and then I use this little glue bottle which will meter a little glue into each biscuit slot. And then I can drop the biscuits in, glue up the mating edge the same way, and put them together. Set it on the clamps and clamp it up. All right, we'll set this aside while I glue up the other half, and after it cures, we'll remove these short clamps and use longer ones to pull the whole thing together. Now, as far as clamp pressure goes, I'm just going to put enough on to pull these joints tightly together. If I squeeze them too much, I'll take the glue out of the joint, but I could also make this buckle and just pop right out of the clamps. I don't want that to happen. Okay, I'd say that's it. Now we'll set this aside. Now here I've just run a rabbet along the top edge of one of the side panels for the pedestal. I'm going to use a piece of plywood to join the sides together. That dado that I just plowed out will be for the bottom shelf of the pedestal. Now that groove is for a couple cross pieces. They're going to run across the back. Well, now we're ready for a little bit of assembly of the pedestal. Some glue in the dado that I cut. And here's some pieces of birch plywood that I've cut. This is the bottom shelf. Bring it flush to the front. And then I'm just going to nail it in place with some 1.5-inch brads. Okay, now I want to make sure it's square to the side. So just take a big framing square, bring it up to it nice and snug, and throw in a couple tacks from this side. Now this is the back of one of the pedestals, and I'm just running a couple cleats of pine across to connect the sides and give it some stability. The reason I'm not closing the whole back end is that these pieces of computer equipment that go inside generate a lot of heat, and that has to be able to dissipate. Okay, now another piece of 3/4-inch plywood goes along the top of each pedestal. This also adds stability, and this will give me a way to attach the desk top. Okay, now with some glue applied to the other side of the pedestal, I'll try to set it all together and nail it up. Okay, let's build the other one. It's just like it. Well, this is dry enough, so let's get to work on the desktop. Let me show you how I'm going to treat the ends of the top. So that I don't see all this end grain, I'm going to apply a breadboard edge. It's a classic type of finish for a tabletop. What I have to do is first cut it nice and straight, and then form a tenon that will fit into a groove of this edge piece. To get a nice straight cut, I'm using this straight edge tool, and I can't tell you how many emails we get about this. It's a straight edge with an integral clamp, and I set it off from my line, the distance equal to the edge of the shoe to the saw blade, and once it's clamped in place, you get a nice straight cut. Now, using my straight edge clamp and my router set up with a 1/2-inch straight cutting bit, I formed one side of the tenon. Now I'll flip it over and do the other side. Now here I'm removing by hand just a little bit of that tenon. I don't want this to show through the edge of the breadboard. And what I'll do on the breadboard is make a stopped groove to conceal this tenon. Now that's the first pass on the groove for that tenon. I'm using a 1/4-inch spiral cutting bit. Because my tenon is a little wider than 1/4 of an inch or thicker, I'm going to move the fence over and make another pass. All right, let's see how we're coming along. All right, that end's good, just snug, but it's a little tight in the middle. And if I look at the end, I can see that it's a little bit wavy. So if I take this little rabbiting plane and carefully trim away some material and keep trying it, you should be able to get it just right, a snug fit. All right, that's close. A little more fine tuning and that joint should fit nice and tight. Okay, just knock the corner off of the tenon a bit. Try it again. That is pretty good. Now I think before I leave tonight, I'll fit the breadboard on the other end. Well, mission accomplished. Last night before I left, I fitted the other breadboard edge. The more I thought about this desktop, the more I felt that the 3/4-inch thickness didn't give it enough beefiness for this large of a desk. So I glued on another piece of material to the breadboard edge, which brings it up to about 1 1/8 inches, and I'll fill in the field after I attach the breadboard. Now, I can't glue the tenon along this edge. If I do that, this field eventually is going to shrink and it'll split right up the middle. So it has to float, and I'm just drilling some holes for dowel pins. And let me show you the next step. I want to be able to elongate the holes in the tenon, and that will allow the top to move back and forth. So I'm just going to use a jigsaw and nibble away some material, a little bit in each direction, just angling it slightly back. Okay. With that done, I can now reinstall the edge, make sure it's centered. Now here in the middle, I am going to use just a little bit of glue to hold the pin. And just drive that through. Here on the ends, they're just going to be dry. All right, with a little bit of glue on 3 strips, 1 for each edge and 1 in the middle, our 3/4 inch top suddenly turns into a 1 1/8 top. Wow. Now this is where my wide belt sander comes in real handy, doing a desktop like this. Of course, you could use a belt sander, and a random orbit sander just takes longer. Now I round over the edges with a 1/4 inch radius. Well, here I'm starting to repair the defects in the top. I'm using a kit that I can buy from my router. There's a little spiral bit and then this collar that rides inside of this template. The template can be any shape that I want. I'm holding it in place with double stick tape, and I just clean out the material. Now I just remove the template, put it over a piece of patching material. I've removed the collar from the router, and now I'll cut the Dutchman. Okay. Now I have a patch. I'm just going to round over the corners, and that will drop right in there. What defect? Now I'm beginning to build some boxes and drawers that are going to be installed inside the pedestals to store the equipment. They're all made out of Baltic birch, and I need a series of rabbits and dados. Here I'm assembling a box which will have some small drawers in which we can store the CDs and any floppy disks. Just a little bit of glue and brads are all I need. Now this assembly is a drawer for the printer copier. And this 1/4 inch piece of plywood in the bottom is going to be an area for paper storage. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 inch piece on the top for the printer. All right, this will support the printer and store our paper. Now I need to build a pull-out tray for the tower. The construction details for this tray are a little different. Just 4 very narrow pieces of plywood mitered on the corners with a piece of 1/2 inch plywood on the top. I had to keep the thickness of the tray as thin as possible in order to have room for the tower. Well, this can't hurt. A little glue block in every corner. Now just a little piece of pine trim to cover up the plywood at the top of the pedestal. Well, now it's time to put the extension slides on the drawers. Okay, let's give it a try. That's great. Okay, now I've located the box, and I'm just going to attach it with a couple screws. All right, now let's slide in the tray for the tower. That's going to be great. I'll be able to pull it all the way out. Here I've just cut some grooves in a panel made up of several boards, and that's going to go right here. And what it is it gives the illusion of drawers, but in fact this is going to be a door. Okay, with a few adjustments, that's what it looks like. These knobs will make it a lot easier to pull these drawers out. Here I'm molding the top edge of the base, which is going to wrap the bottom of the pedestal. This is a little relief cut in the base molding so that the pedestal will sit on 4 points. Okay, I like to cut biscuit slots and use biscuits and glue on these mitered corners. I'll do everything I can to make sure that that joint stays tight. All right, well that takes care of that pedestal. The techniques to put this pedestal together will be the same, except instead of having a door, there'll be a pull-out draw front. Nothing brings out the beauty of this pine more than a clear finish. But I want something that's going to be tough, that can take a lot of hard use. So I'm going to use a polyurethane, put on several coats with a light sanding between each. To connect the two pedestals, how about a place to hide the wires with a drop-down front to get at it? On the printer draw front, I've added a couple strong backs to keep the front from curling. In the front of the pedestals, I have this hardware, which allows me to build a piece which looks like a drawer when it's closed, but when it's open and I flip it down, I have a place for the keyboard. 4 screws in each pedestal secure the top.
Nice and neat back here, Norm. Hardly a wire in sight.
Well, Tim, this is great. Plenty of room for my phone, a lamp, and I can spread out my paperwork. I've got tunes, and I've got the computer.
I love it.
If I don't need the keyboard anymore, just fold up the front, slide it out of the way. If I need to get at the tower to slip in a disc, it's right there. If I need to get to the back, I can just pull it out.
That's great.
Let's see if we got any faxes yet. All right, look at this, the first fax to the new Yankee computer desk.
Perfect.
Well, Tim, thanks for all your help. This is a really nice package.
This is one sweet desk.
Thanks.
Get whittling with our wonderful website, folks. realtimetv.co.uk/workshop.